mystique surrounding the whole subject of lucid dreaming has, until now, solely been a byproduct of the sheer difficulties involved in initially producing them via a DILD, and then reproducing them on any kind of regular basis using such methods. Undeniably then, Wiles makes lucid dreaming rather easy and ready accessible. The method to induce a wild in itself is as straightforward and uncomplicated as, say, changing a fan belt or a spark plug is for the home mechanic. So much so that just about anyone with even an iota of logical reasoning can very quickly and easily learn how to do it. If Wiles makes lucid dreaming so readily available, why then, with only very little practice, is it so universally easy to lucid dream on such a regular basis? What is it really all about, and is there a philosophy as such to lucid dreaming? I'm not sure that there currently is one, at least not one that hasn't been appropriated or fabricated by some strange cult or another and incorporated into a meaning entirely of their own, regardless of whether this apparent inherent ability of ours to lucid dream truthfully belongs there or not. So, is there a meaning to lucid dreaming? By which of course I mean, is there perhaps some creditable reason or purpose behind being able to do so? Or is this rather odd and ostensibly unexplained phenomena, as science suggests, merely some physical or psychological glitch of perception? One that with practice people are able to learn and exploit for the purposes of mere entertainment, but which means little else beyond that. What, for example, would it mean to the way people lived and viewed their daily lives if, instead of always just having ordinary random dreams, it suddenly became possible for just about anyone to enter into a variety of lucid dreaming states at will? Wouldn't that eventually affect people's entire outlook on life and the way they tend to see themselves living it? Ordinary dreams are still little understood by medical science and are currently accepted as being a byproduct of consciousness, the result of a kind of standby mode that the brain enters into during sleep instead of shutting down completely. Something that is, perhaps, utilized to explore unconsciously novel or unfamiliar neural pathways encountered during waking that the cognitive part of the brain goes over and rehearses, which results in us having dreams. The physical body apparently even secretes amino acids specifically designed to inhibit movement whilst we are asleep, lest people inadvertently act out their dreams. We need to dream, but where exactly does this ability to lucid dream fit into the grand scheme of things? Current understanding suggests that the physical need for sleep, plus that of REM sleep, rapid eye movement, the period during which we dream, in particular is pretty much universal across a wide spectrum and variety of organisms. The fact that a lot of nature's work goes into energy conservation is self-evident, but why many creatures also need to dream during their resting state in order to become revitalized is perhaps less clear. Studies have proved that depriving animals of the REM sleep in which they typically dream eventually renders them confused and ineffective during waking consciousness, and in many cases even deranges or kills them. For example, without REM sleep, we humans apparently just wither and waste away, both physically and mentally. It is as though such people haven't slept at all and exhibit many of the symptoms of sleep deprivation, even though they may have indeed physically slept for hours. It would seem therefore that REM sleep alone, along with the dreams that accompany it, is the key to obtaining the rest we so badly need. This is kind of odd, since it raises the question of why dreaming is so necessary for us to feel revitalized as opposed to just sleeping for several hours. Could it be true, therefore, that we really only sleep for hours and hours just to have several accumulated minutes of REM sleep? In which case, do we sleep only to dream? The point here is that our ability to lucid dream appears to be homogeneously universal, in that just about anybody is able to do it, regardless of age, education, or background. In other words, lucid dreaming appears to be an entirely innate ability that requires only the intention to use it in order to bring it into full availability and operational use. almost as though it's something everyone should already know about and use, only it's not. Perhaps this is because somewhere in our history, and I'm really only speculating here, it used to be more prevalent, but gradually fell into disuse and became forgotten about until only the occasional village shaman or medicine man remembered anything about it. The only remnant of it that remains today consists of the standard, unconscious, nonsensical dreams that everyone without exception experiences on a daily basis. Setting aside the many different cultural and religious connotations that have been added to dreams and lucid dreaming over long periods of time, many of them confusing and contradictory, maybe it is time to put all the current data aside and start observing and collecting anew. To arrive at a more accurate assessment, any subsequent data we now collect should be based entirely upon the experience itself, rather than trying to reconcile it to one potentially wacky idea or another that already exists, scientific or otherwise. While we have yet to come up with any definitive answers, we do find that an acute awareness and observation of the process of dreaming and having dreams is, in itself, quite revealing in many ways. It highlights a very specific use and application of our whole general apparatus of perception, often with direct implications about the way we use and apply it in our daily waking awareness too. Apparently, this is because the apparatus we use in perceiving and modelling both our waking and dream worlds are one and the same, lucid or otherwise. One appears to be a reflection of the other and vice versa. This brings us to the two types of lucid dreaming involved, DILDs and wilds, each method standing in stark contrast to the other in terms of approach and accessibility, although in many instances the results are inevitably the same. However, the marked differences between the two methods also highlight aspects of each other that might otherwise go unnoticed and remain unexamined if there was nothing with which to compare each method. For example, with DILDs, the process itself of entering into a lucid dream is obscured by the need to fall first into an otherwise quite ordinary dreamless sleep, only becoming lucid later once an ordinary dream begins, often hours later. I feel that this whole approach perpetuates a situation that remains largely unchallenged, as the very infrequency and usual vagueness of the dreams engendered by DILDs have the distinct tendency to keep the whole subject shrouded in mystery rather than clarifying anything. The best even an expert DILD dreamer can expect is to lucid dream every time he attempts to do so, albeit without ever really knowing how he actually does it. If DILDs were the only option open to us, then surely that would be good evidence of the whole affair being merely some form of glitch of perception. However, the fact that DILDs can be superseded by the more fully aware process of wilds, wherein one quite consciously chooses whether or not to lucid dream, tends to suggest other alternatives. The fully conscious and systematic exploration of another type of reality altogether for one, and the fully conscious exploration of an altered state without the use of drugs being another. Everything that occurs during a wild seems to make clear and apparent sense all on its own. The dreamer almost immediately becomes cognizant of lacking some kind of deeper background knowledge, experience, and/or perhaps missing cultural reference point that would lend some clearer purpose to it all beyond that of surface entertainment and novelty value alone. So okay, it's not that difficult to accept that we dream in order to refresh ourselves, but we've apparently settled for the very minimum default value of it, even though we surely have the proven ability to plug into the much greater energizing source of lucid dreaming. This brings us to another noteworthy point, that another emerging but undeniable fact about lucid dreaming is that even the slightest contact with the lucid dreaming state results in what can only be called a thorough refreshing of whatever it is that makes us feel tired in the first place. Effectively, a mere 45 or 90 minutes of lucid dreaming is noticeably more physically restoring than a whole night's worth of ordinary sleep and dreams, in that after a lucid dreaming session one feels bursting with a surplus of energy that translates into an overall feeling similar to that of glowing health. This energized mood usually lasts for around 3 or 4 days before gradually fading away, a sensation, I might add, that one experiences from one's very first ever lucid dreaming session. The experience itself is sufficient in that some kind of internal understanding takes place, which may or may not be verbalized in cogent rational terms, a clear case of the experimental versus the experiential. This inability to describe lucid dreaming, however, is no barrier to experiencing more of it. In fact, the very opposite is true in that too much rationality and reasoning whilst lucid dreaming is actually a surefire way to get oneself booted right out of the dreaming state altogether, although with practice one eventually learns to strike the right balance. This is perhaps similar to standing midway along the length of a seesaw, in that once balanced, small movements either way can easily tip everything in that direction unless consciously counterbalanced, and is something that can only be learned with practice. Starting off as we are, inexperienced explorers crossing into a relatively unexplored frontier, only time and effort will map and/or identify certain common features of the dreaming state upon entering into it. The better may be to signpost the way into and through it to fellow explorers coming along behind. What we need to explore and map this new area of experience and perception properly is daring, gutsy people who will have the time and motivation slowly to push back the boundaries of these other states of awareness maintained during sleep, if it's actually considered to be sleep at all, in which we can soberly function. The feeling during lucid dreaming is that there's far more to it than that of being just another playground. The truth is that we don't really know anything yet about the dreaming state beyond mere rumor and superstition. Whatever you do with it, the fact is that the practice of wilding eventually begins quite naturally to impinge upon one's daily waking awareness in ways that are difficult to explain. The wonder of lucid dreaming is somehow gradually passed across to ordinary waking awareness too, in which case it ceases to be ordinary anymore at all, and indeed becomes extraordinary in the extreme. This alone warrants its explanation, if only for the way it ultimately deepens one's perception and appreciation of the wider waking world and that of ourselves being alive in it. That if developing one's inner being is a euphemism for getting closer to one's inner self and, perhaps, being more in contact with reality, then I'd say that lucid dreaming develops one's inner being by giving some of the exercise it so badly needs in order to stretch its wings and grow. The term spiritual exercise is too vague and generalized to be of much practical use to anyone, but I guess lucid dreaming could certainly fall in that category, together with other practices like meditation and yoga, especially if one were to consider lucid dreaming to be part of one's meditations and the inner experience gained from such practices. The simple truth is that the more one comes in contact with one's own inner being, the more it becomes available to you. And nothing places you in direct contact with one's inner self more than lucid dreaming. Of course, meditation and yoga have a similar effect, although nothing is as compelling and encouraging as lucid dreaming by comparison. Like anything really, it takes discipline to perform meditation every day until it eventually begins to count. Whereas, with lucid dreaming, the results are not only virtually instantaneous, but also absolutely staggering as well. The only discipline involved, which is actually quite similar to meditation, is to maintain the correct state of mind that prolongs the experience, something which, of course, takes a little while to learn, but within a very short period of time, it becomes increasingly easy to lucid dream almost at will. This lucid dreaming on demand is key to mastering a more general awareness of how perception actually functions and works in real-time waking awareness as well as in dreaming. Basically because the inner cognitive apparatus of perception employed in both instances are literally one and the same. Thus, whatever your particular purpose is in learning to do it, be prepared as your proficiency increases, for lucid dreaming to eventually begin to have potentially far-reaching effects in your daily waking world and your personal outlook on life in general. Why? Because at the very basic level, there would seem to be two main areas to this lucid dreaming business, which you'll quickly discover. Firstly, the very personal and potentially completely self-indulgent aspect of the whole thing, one in which any of your strangest and wildest fantasies can easily and quickly be made to come true, albeit only virtually. A kind of voyeur's utopia and personal virtual reality entertainment center all rolled into one. Secondly, a somewhat more sober and objective approach where one explores the dreaming state as an explorer and observer only, the better perhaps to record events as they unfold more accurately, possibly with a view to mapping some of the confines of the near unknown, not only for your own greater understanding of it for yourself, but also for the benefit of others if you were inclined to consider sharing that information. Without that objectivity, there is also the possibility that, because lucid dreaming is a completely subjective state of being that's directly connected to one's inner sense of reality, the dreams themselves can therefore come to mean whatever you might personally want them to mean, depending on what you happen to believe in. Thus, a word of caution is recommended in this direction, that if, for example, you are a very religious person, your lucid dreams might very easily begin to automatically adopt religious-type connotations. The only problem there being that if you go looking for God or angels or whatever, then for sure you'll probably find something. Only in reality, it's unlikely to be God or a real angel. Moreover, there are other, similar things that one could quite easily become lost in, if not consciously guarded against. This kind of thing, going into a lucid dream with a prior agenda I mean, being one of the main reasons why I'd personally recommend choosing the second option and attempting to remain as objective as possible about the whole dreaming experience, and thereby behaving accordingly as one's experience and knowledge of the lucid dreaming state expands. That the very nature of knowledge per se is different under the circumstances of lucid dreaming, as it's very strange to be standing in a particular position in awareness where it then becomes possible to step consciously into and out of a lucid dreaming situation at will. The action of doing this stepping is a state of awareness that comes to you in and of itself, in and at the very moment it's required and not beforehand. It's not a state of awareness, please understand, that one carries around in one's head, for example, and yet it's always right there exactly when you need it. In the dream reality or state, one knows nothing in advance and everything at the moment. Everything during the time of wilding is seemingly self-explanatory and remains with you afterwards. However, exactly how you accomplished it begins to fade after a while, particularly after waking up in the waking world, wherein for quite some time afterwards, everything that occurred and how you did it remains very clearly in view but gradually fades away. It is almost as though a dark curtain slowly descends on one's memory of the finer details of the whole experience as waking concerns and pursuits again rise to the fore. Oddly enough, the same situation also prevails in the dreaming world. The direct memories of the things one normally thinks about and does during waking also undergo a similar process whereby they typically fade from view or become noticeably suspended to some extent. This produces the effect, for example, of having prepared questions ready to ask upon entering into dreaming, only to forget them immediately and almost in entirety upon doing so, because they all now seem somewhat rather asinine. The point is that the kinds of things one thinks about in dreaming are not the same as those in waking and vice versa. It is, however, entirely possible to bring full waking memories and planned experiments into lucid dreaming. It's just that to do so takes an inordinately concentrated effort, plus that of a certain amount of determination in order to carry them out, when the direct feeling and impulse at the time is mostly one of just immediately forgetting about all that stuff and getting on with the business of dreaming instead. Basically, we are not really that much different from other mammals and creatures. Beyond our ability to talk, the thing that makes human beings really stand out is our apparent ability to create a conceptual image of the world and then relate to that idea, or any idea apparently, to the exclusion of virtually everything and anything else. Thus our densely populated human world is full of different cultures and beliefs, all competitively vying and clamouring for attention. So much so that some suggest humanity has gradually become divorced from the underlying background reality that all other living creatures on this planet still have and retain an awareness of. Accordingly, human beings, via this ability, have created their very own multifaceted version of reality, one that increasingly flies in the face of the way things are in reality for the rest of nature, to the point that most people these days generally feel that they lack a deeper connection to the rest of the universe, an idea that leaves them feeling somehow empty or incomplete, and thus has people searching for some kind of deeper meaning to life, whether it be religion or philosophy. The standard social norm of having a good job, a nice home and family doesn't always seem totally to fulfill that yearning need. I suppose this is precisely where religion and philosophy are supposed to come into the picture, except that those religions and philosophies themselves also often seem to fail us, in that almost all our religions only really succeed in distancing us even farther from nature instead of bringing us closer to it. Our religions comfort us by pertaining to answer all our questions, only they don't really answer them beyond telling us to behave ourselves in the meantime, while at the same time, rather frustratingly, just putting off the whole subject until after we die. As such, they are more a way of explaining away the mysteries of life rather than bringing us closer to them. I suspect the simple truth is that there is probably no sense, no meaning per se, or at least not a rational one, to life in quite the way we might want there to be. That while we are alive, we can of course do all the usual things that the majority of people like to do, such as working and having homes and families. Nevertheless, we still have to understand that all these things do not really constitute nor represent the meaning of life in and of themselves. Yet in modern society, that is exactly and precisely what people are encouraged to turn to for some sort of sense of completion and solace. The end result is that no one really knows what they're doing anymore. More often than not, we merely bluff our way through life instead of consciously living it to the full, in the complete awareness of doing so. That perhaps by going along with the universe, instead of rebelling against it by indulging in all our own ideas, that we project and superimpose upon the world instead of dealing with it the way it really is, we might just gain a few insights. Not because we have so cleverly figured it all out with our pencils and computers and such like, but because by going along with things sometimes, you can also come to understand more of its true nature, and that, although it may not be able to give you straight verbal answers, that doesn't mean you can't still learn something from observing the way it behaves and conducts itself with you and with everything else. Maybe what we have to try and first understand and accept is that nature itself isn't intellectual, and that in the main, it has got to where it has today after billions of years of unfolding without the benefits of rational thinking and language to explain it. That although its purpose, its and thus our whole reason for being, is a totally silent one that requires no explanation to function, this doesn't mean that we can't still learn to go along with it and pick up a few interesting and useful things about it and ourselves in the process. Nature is our friend. Nature doesn't lie. In other words, if we start off at home by looking a little more into our own nature and our own natural abilities, then later may come a view of the bigger picture in which we all naturally belong. The whole subject of lucid dreaming is fascinating, but is it really all just for entertainment alone, or is there maybe something even more to it? What if, for example, all these multi-layered dream realms could also be something to do with parallel worlds and or dimensions, possibly even the gateway to them. A possible proof of dream worlds being representative of the reality of other dimensions and parallel worlds would be if people could meet up with each other and communicate on those levels of awareness rather than being merely confined to the limitations of one's own imagination and the phantom images of other people. I've certainly talked to quite a few people in my dreams, but if they're all really just figments of my own imagination, then I guess I don't really actually want to talk to them, except perhaps as they're possibly being hidden aspects of myself. Basically, I have been trying to put it to that the general nature of perception is, at its roots, dreamlike, and that this just might account for why we sometimes take our ordinary dreams for being unreal instead of recognizing them for what they really are, i.e., altered states of awareness that we are compelled to enter into on a daily basis for the kind of energetic rejuvenation they afford. Dreams in which one can be either awake or unconscious, albeit with the same result. We become refreshed. From the multifaceted point of view of Wiles, it turns out that lucid dreaming is the activation of only one possible state of altered awareness and the things you can do with it. Another option is the waking state that everyone otherwise takes for granted, but which may also be a kind of dream, perceptually speaking. Obviously, there's more to us than just those abilities alone, namely, that where there's one altered state of awareness that everyone can agree on, then it's reasonable to assume that there are probably more. So then, we can either treat lucid dreaming as a thing in itself, the only goal of Wiles, so to speak, or we can treat it as just one small part of much larger, overall awareness that includes doing things like lucid dreaming. Is there a philosophy to lucid dreaming? Is there something, a meaning behind it all? There undoubtedly is, albeit currently hidden from view, and discovering, unraveling, and understanding that philosophy is obviously going to take time and experience. Not because it's particularly difficult, but because it's a whole new field of endeavor containing as yet unrealized reference points. The implications and ramifications of this hypothesis, I'm wagering, could well be far-reaching, if not immense, in terms of obtaining a greater understanding of ourselves and the nature of the world around us. This completes this beginner's tutorial on learning to wild. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this instruction intriguing and inspiring and would like to learn more. In which case, please subscribe to this channel and or check back soon for any other video updates that may be added in the near future. Anyway, bye for now, plus happy wilding to you all. See you!